Hi, my name is Bernice, and this is a review of the CSS selectors. The selectors are used for selecting the content and text that you want to style on your website. The selectors are part of the CSS rule set. CSS selectors select the HTML elements according to its ID, class, type, attribute, and more. There are several different types of selectors in CSS. The common one is the element selector, the ID selector, class selector, universal selector, attribute selectors, grouping selector, child and descendant selectors, general and adjacent sibling selectors, and pseudo-element and pseudo-class selectors. The element selector selects the HTML elements by their name. For example, h1, div, p. ID selector is, in CSS, the ID selector is the name preceded by the number sign, the hash character. It uses the ID attribute of an HTML element to match the specific HTML element. So the ID selector in HTML is for unique. You would only give an ID as unique for that one selector. So in this example here, the P has an ID of para 1, and you have the content, and then you have the ending P, and then you have another P that does not have an ID, but you would only have an ID would only belongs to one element. So the ID of an element should be unique within the page, so the ID selector is used to select one unique element. The class selector, that's preceded by a period. It uses the class attribute of an HTML element to match the specific HTML element. A class can have more than one element can belong to the same class. So you could have, in this example, a H1 with a class intro and a P with a class intro. And each one of those belongs to the same class. And then there's another P that does not belong to that class. And in the style section, you see we're setting the dot intro to the text align in the color red. So it would style those elements that have the class set to intro. The universal selector is denoted by an asterisk and matches all elements on the page. So if you have any other specific selector on the element, then the universal selector is omitted. So in the style section, we have the star, the asterisk, the universal selector, and then we have some font family we're setting and the color we're setting. And then we have the number sign test. So that is the ID test over here. And so it is not going to set the universal selectors on that. It's going to set it to green. The attribute selector selects the HTML elements that have a specific attribute or an attribute with a specified value. You can create an attribute selector by having the attribute in a pair of square brackets, or the most commonly used attribute selectors are the attribute selector applies the style rule for all elements which have a specified attribute. The attribute equals value selector uses the equal operator to select the element whose attribute value is exactly equal to the given value, and the attribute with the tilde equal value uses the tilde equal operator to select elements that have the specified attribute with a value containing a given word delimited by spaces. The attribute equal with it has the line and it equals uses that operator to select elements that have the specified attribute with the value either equal to a given string or starting with that string followed by a hyphen. And then the attribute with the caret equal value selector uses the caret equal operator to select elements that have the specified attribute with a value beginning exactly with a given string. Attribute $ equal values selector uses the $equal operator to select elements that have the specified attribute with a value ending exactly with a given string. The comparison is case sensitive, and the attribute $equal value selector uses the $equal operator to select elements that have the specified attribute with a value containing a given substring. So this is an example with the attribute selector. We here are using title, then there is the P with length, the line equal EN, and the class, another one with the class equal equal warning. So that gives you some examples and then how it's used in these different paragraph elements. The grouping selector, the CSS grouping selector is used to apply a common style for the number of elements on the page. You can group the selector using a comma separator. It allows you to specify the same properties and rules for more than one element at the same time. And this reduces the code and extra effort to declare common styles for each element. And in this one, you see it's H1, H2. Child selectors are all the elements that are the children of a specified element. The syntax of a child selector is element greater than element with the property value, which selects the elements which are the children of a specific parent. The left side of it's the greater sign is a parent element, and on the right is the children. So in this example, we have the style and we have div, the greater sign P, and that is the P is a child of the div. And over here we see there is a div, and inside that div we have H3, we have a P, and then you have a section with another P and then another P. So it's going to select the children of the P children of the div, but this is now a P inside a section inside that. And so that is an example. Descendant selectors. The descendant selectors, they select all the elements which are children of the element. It allows you to limit the target elements to the ones who are descendants of another element. The syntax is element with property value within the curly braces. You write the parents separate with a space and then the actual element you want to target. And this is an example. You have div and space P, and inside here you see the example. You have div and P, and then you have in this time that there's a section with a P inside that, and it's going to work on that because it's a descendant. The general sibling selector selects all the elements which are siblings of a specified element. The syntax is element tilde element and then the property and the values, and it selects all the sibling elements that are in the same hierarchy level. So in this example, you have a body and a P. Then inside the div, you have a P, the first child, and P, the second child. And then you have the closing of the div, and then you have the P, which is a sibling of the div elements. and then another P, which is another sibling of the div element. Adjacent sibling selector. The adjacent sibling selector selects the elements that are the adjacent sibling of a specified element. The syntax is element plus elements with then the property value, which selects the second one if it immediately follows the first one in order of appearance in an HTML page. So you have div plus P. So that's the adjacent sibling P. So here is you have a P with not me. Inside the div, you have a first child of div and a second child of div. Then the P with the first sibling and P the second. Pseudo class selector is used to specify the state of an element. It lets us apply a style to an element which is related with external factors like the history of the navigator. So is the colon visited, the status of its content, colon checked on a certain form element, or the position of the mouse. There's a hover, and then the syntax for the pseudo class selector is selector pseudo class with the property and value. These pseudo classes are used with the selectors to style the element on a specific state. Pseudo class selector. So you have the link, the visited, active, hover, focus, lang, and first child. This is an example of the pseudo class selector with the hover. Pseudo element selector. Pseudo elements allows you to style the specified parts of an element that is not available under the DOM tree, the document object model tree. It lets us apply the style to the first letter or the first line of an element's content, change the font of the first line of a paragraph, and more. The syntax of pseudo element selector is selector pseudo dash element and the property value. And these are pseudo element selectors with the first dash letter, first dash line, before and after. And this is an example of the pseudo element selector specificity. When we have more than one CSS style rule for an element, the browser selects one style rule for the element based on a specificity as a score rank priority. Specificity only applies when the same element is targeted by multiple CSS declarations, and if it's a set of rules applied to CSS selectors to determine which style is applied to an element. More specific selector will have the higher precedence. So the level of a selector has four categories. They're inline CSS, ID selector, class attribute, and pseudo class selectors, element, and pseudo element selector. Inline CSS has higher priority, and element and pseudo element selectors have the lowest priority. Thank you, and I wish you a great day.